Welcome to School Life Unpacked, the podcast for anyone navigating the complexities of their child's education. Join me, Natasha Curtis-Ego, and a lineup of insightful guests as we explore the challenges, joys, and surprises of school life, offering support and tips to help us feel more confident and connected. Today, we have a guest who is honouring us by revisiting us with a whole new amazing topic. Today, we're going to look at nurturing positive behaviour and connections. If you could reintroduce yourself, that would be amazing.
Hello, my name is Natalie Toms. I work presently at Southend Council for the early years and childcare development team, and I'm an improvement teacher, which means I have the privilege of going into nurseries, preschools, reception classes, and supporting them with good early years practice, encouraging them to think about how to develop their own practice and empower them to do so.
Last time you were here, we touched a tiny little bit on behavioural sort of techniques and things that could encourage you to nurture positive behaviour and rebuild those bonds between children and their parents or whomever they are, their caring adult. So could we just discuss a little bit about that and sort of talk about what we're going to discuss today?
Yes, of course. So I deliver training on this to all our settings, and I am very lucky that within the council there's two wonderful educational psychologists who have helped me deliver the package and also give their experience and guidance alongside with my own. And we came up with a training package that we'll talk about today, some of the things that came up from that. And it's really just understanding that behaviour is communication. I think it's unpicking all that. We hear that phrase bandied around quite a lot, but it's really about understanding why a child may behave in a particular way and how we handle that in the most effective way to still keep that nurturing connection and for it not to become an opportunity to punish, but more correct and hopefully learn and teach from it. That's his name correct. It's Dan, I say Seagal. I hope it's correct. I think it's a psychologist who works on helping parents understand their children's brain and why they behave a particular way. And he came up with this hand model, which is nice and simple to be able to support. It was tucking in your thumb and putting your fingers over the top of your hand, and the front of where your fingers are becomes your upstairs brain, so your thinking brain, the one where you do all your thinking. And he explains that downstairs where your arm is, that's your downstairs brain, so that's more your kind of primitive brain, so that's kind of your breathing, that's your eating, that's your fight and flight mode. And then in between where your thumb is, the thumb is represented in the brain as the amygdala, the warning system for your brain, and then your hand on the inside is all your emotional side. And the idea is that little thumb, that little amygdala, if it starts wobbling because it feels like it's in danger or it feels a threat, it will keep going. And I think in one of the clips that I show, he explains it as like hanging onto a cliff, and you keep hanging on, you keep hanging on, you keep hanging on, and eventually you will drop. And he says eventually you flip your lid, which is where your fingers will come up and it exposes kind of your emotional side, and your downstairs brain is then in control. And your downstairs brain is only working on survival, whereas your upstairs, your thinking brain, is where you want to be able to get to, because that's when you can engage and make sensible decisions. So one of the things we talk quite a lot in the training is about understanding that when a child has flipped their lid, at that point there's absolutely no point trying to give instructions, there's no point trying to talk about their behaviour or telling them off about it. It's all about trying to get that lid back on and the child calm, so that then when they're completely calm you can address the behaviour. And that way, it's very much at that point when the child is with their lid flipped, they cannot process what you're saying. I always think of it like a cloud head, that it's so fuzzy, they can't think. And I think as adults, when we're incredibly cross, sometimes if there's lots of stuff going on around you, just can everyone stop just for a minute, because you need to be able to, as an adult, be able to kind of think, reflect and try and hopefully calm yourself down. And I think we don't realise how for our little ones it's possibly even more intense, because they're not aware of what these feelings are, what these emotions are. They're still learning and developing. And I think that's his way of explaining it. So you have your upstairs thinking brain and your downstairs brain. And the idea is that if you flip your lid, it's about helping. Our job is to help the children be calm enough so that we can then put that lid back on, get their thinking brain back engaged. And then that means that we can then hopefully, when they're calm, address the behaviour and see if we can help support them going forward with what they might do on another occasion.
Which sounds challenging. As a parent, from a parent's perspective, you want them to calm down, but you want them to kind of do it very quickly.
Yes.
So it's kind of, I suppose, giving space.
Yes, and I think also, yes, when you're out out, for example, in public or something. There's a level of embarrassment as a parent as well, of feeling that everybody's watching you and judging you. But I think it's really important that we realise that as an adult as well, you don't calm down straight away. Sometimes someone may apologise, but you may still need time to process what's happened. So yes, it does take time. And also I think sometimes our own emotions are brought up there, kind of if they're not doing as we've asked, it can bring up a whole level of frustration yourself, and then very often that's what's fed back onto your child, is the frustration, isn't it, really, of not conforming or not doing as they've been asked. One of the things that we do bring up in the training quite an awful lot of time is about adults reflecting on themselves a lot and just thinking about how they're feeling at that point when they're going. And I very often say to settings, if something's happened and you charge in, just stop and just take a breath before you go in, just because you want to be able to respond rather than react to the situation. And that's hard. It's not easy, and it takes time and learning how to respond rather than react. But that's something that we really do advocate, is kind of this taking a breath before you're doing it, just so that you know. And I think one of the things that's been around for a very, very long time, it's really important to know, is there's something called the behaviour iceberg, which is just basically a visual way or a pictorial way of showing that we see the tip of the iceberg. So we may see the refusal to do things, the crying, the threatening, challenging behaviours, the anger, the avoidance, sometimes the running, the fleeing, hiding. So we see all that behaviour, but actually underneath, which is kind of the iceberg model, what's going on underneath the water, there's lots of other feelings. So a child may say, I feel cross, but actually they might be worried. They might be anxious about something that's about to happen. They might be feeling jealous. Maybe someone's got something they have, or maybe they've lined up first. Someone else has lined up for them. They might be feeling frustrated, alone, insecure, overwhelmed by a situation and not knowing. So I think we always talk about that tip of that iceberg. The behaviour you see is not always what you need to unpick. You may need to sort out and calm down the situation above the water, but actually then you need to unpick underneath what's been going on to try and work out how to support your child, or how to support children within setting.
That idea that when you're seeing the tip of the iceberg is the child is at the point where they've just about to, or they've flipped their lid. So you're seeing their sort of, you know, the part of the brain, like the survival, the primitive part of the brain.
Yeah.
So with that, like, what would be the techniques that you would try and encourage people to promote to get a child to calm down, so that you can get to the point where you can sit down and have that conversation of unpicking what's really going on?
So one of the most important things we teach during the training is it's all about knowing your children. So obviously within setting, it's about knowing their key children or the children that they work with. As a parent, you do know your child. You know which things are important for your child. You know which things maybe trigger your child to react a certain way. And I think it's really important as a parent to really pick up on all those things. So knowing your child beforehand, like if you go a certain place and they don't like lining up for very long, it's having strategies in place for that. I think one of the things that came out really clearly from the training, and it was one of my educational psychologist colleagues explained it kind of like preparing for the storm. And I think it's really important to think, and we do this as parents anyway, but you will pack a bag for everything you need, but it's also thinking ahead if there are opportunities where you're going to be hanging around and waiting around for quite a long time. I used to always have in my handbag mini little plastic wallets with just a little bit of Lego, only a few pieces, but so that if we were stuck somewhere for ages, they could just have a little bit of Lego to play around with. If you know that you may need some sensory tools, so your fidget tools, having those in your bag. As I mentioned last time when we spoke, food is a huge regulator. It really helps children with being able to calm their central nervous systems down. So I was explaining to some of the settings the other day, bottles are great now because they have that little tube at the top, and that sucking motion is really good for calming the central nervous system. So having your drinks to have a little suck. And I think also if a child's really heightened at a point, obviously you wouldn't be handing over drinks and you wouldn't be handing over resources like as in sort of sensory toys, because they might end up being chucked back at you. But if the child's really heightened, I think it is judging the mood. Do they need, some children will want an embrace straight away and they need that physical touch and that really pressure of that cuddle. But there's other children that won't need that, and they will need you to just give them a little bit of space. I think a setting asked me this the other day when we were talking about giving space. She said, but if you're telling me that I've got to, and we'll explain in a moment a little bit about time in, you're explaining to me that I've got to do time in, but they don't want me anywhere near them. And I said, it's not about necessarily being right next to them. It's about being within their kind of their peripheral. So it's kind of making sure that you step back if they need that space, making sure that any other children, if you have other children and within settings, so that children are kept out of the way, and just sort of say, look, I'm here when you're ready, but not having too many demands, especially as well if a child's really overwhelmed, the last thing you need to be doing is giving them lots of instructions because they cannot process it at that point. So giving them space and just saying, I'm here when you're ready, darling. I'm here to look after you. I'm here to keep you safe. And then just keeping quiet for a little while. Very often if they're really agitated, sometimes if you know that they're not going to come over and hurt, because obviously sometimes when they are really distressed, they can be quite physical because they have, I think I was reading a document recently which was saying people underestimate the fact that the reason sometimes children hit and kick is because they haven't got the words to express that actually I'm feeling really frustrated at the moment. So their way of showing it, as we all know, is to lash out. But sitting down and being calm, I think it's really about you modelling with your own body. And as we just said, it's so important to respond rather than react. Reacting can be your voice going higher, so they straight away pick up on that. It can be you going over to them, maybe if they're not feeling that way. And I think it's really, another thing she taught me was about like your pace, your pitch and your position is just being aware. Is it that child that wants the comfort and closeness and that really tight hug to feel safe and feel calm? Or is it a child that would just like a little bit of space to kind of, and having, like I say, if there are spaces within your home that they can have, I advocate within settings to have sensory areas. So like only a little space, it doesn't need to be big, but somewhere they know that if they're really struggling, that we call it regulation stations. Some settings will have tents, some settings have just a cushion on the floor, but it's just a little area where they know that if they want to, they can go there. They may have, like I say, some fidget toys, they may have some puzzles, they may have a little drink or snack, and just have that ability to be able to calm. And then it's when you then can say, right, I'm here now. Would you like to talk about it? What happened? But it's, just they're the main thing is preparing for the storm. So I think the point of the preparing for the storm is that children do feel overwhelmed. Children do have big emotions and they are going to come. And one of the things that my colleague says in the training is, I'm going to teach you a little about co-regulation. You probably come here just for that and you think I'm going to solve your problems. But actually, all I'm going to say is you need to prepare and be ready. And these are some tools and techniques you can use, but it is going to come. And so you just have to think about what you're going to do next time to be able to support in that situation.
As parents, if we don't have the tools, we can't give them to our little people. So I look and I think, when you talk about managing the storm, and I'm looking back at like my childhood, and my little brother used to have these little outbursts, and he was just overwhelmed. Do you not think?
Yeah. And I think learning more, we have learnt more. We know so much more nowadays. And early childhood trauma is more prevalent nowadays. We're more aware of what that actually means and the fact that there are vulnerable families and there are vulnerable children, and being able to make those positive connections with them are vastly important. But I think from kind of how I grew up, probably similar to you, it was more a behaviourist kind of view, which is you do something, you get punished for it.
Absolutely.
And there's
consequences
no two ways
to your actions.
And I still think that's true. There are still consequences to your actions, a little bit different nowadays. So lots of settings use something called relational practice, which is, as I'm speaking to you about, is understanding the child. It's not just a consequence. And hopefully times have changed in settings where a child will be placed on a chair kind of in time out. There are still some that do, and obviously it's kind of educating people that there can be a different way. And I think you and I had a conversation previously about time out is when our children have the biggest emotions, we're pushing them away and saying, you need to deal with this on your own, and when you're ready you can come back to us. And actually we don't want that. We don't want children growing up into adults thinking that the only way they can handle their emotions is keeping it to themselves and dealing with it by themselves. Actually, what we want to advocate, and we've learnt more about now, is actually if we talk to children about their emotions, talk to them about what happened and how they can change their behaviour or put strategies in place to be able to support them, the hope is that we're going to grow emotionally well-rounded adults that know to reach out for help when they need it, rather than containing and keeping it themselves. And I think one of the things about behaviourist parenting is very much of the fact that it very much teaches kind of don't get caught. So you learn very quickly, one, possibly fearful. It can sometimes break the connection between a parent and a child because it feels very unfair and very unjust. And it assumes that because of the punishment, the behaviour will change. And it's not necessarily. If the child didn't understand why they behaved a particular way, they're not going to know next time. They're just going to learn next time to try and not get caught or try and hide it so that they don't get into trouble. And it detaches from that kind of natural cause and effect. And whereas when you do your relational practice, it is all about talking to children and when they're calm, then saying to them, okay, so let's work out what happened. Oh, so he took your car from you. Well, that must have been really frustrating. What could we have done next time rather than hitting? Because that got you in trouble and you had to give the car up or had to move away. So what could you do next time? And kind of giving them that sort of vocabulary. So then it becomes more of a teaching model as opposed to, you've done this, there's your punishment, we move on.
So it's understanding, like you said earlier, understanding the behaviour and what led to it.
Yeah.
But also what I've noticed is we're giving them the tools, the language to be able to express. So next time they can say, oh, I'm frustrated because little baby Joe took my favourite toy and broke it. But being the language to be able to say what it is.
And language is so important for our little ones. It is. Yeah. And I always heard, I think I said it on the last one, but if a child can say the word Tyrannosaurus Rex, why are we worried about teaching them big words? Children embrace big words. They love big words as long as they understand what they mean. And I think, yes, it's very much part of the training that we do is all about saying you need to be able to start teaching children about their emotions. So that can be reading books. And there's so many wonderful books out there nowadays that can be read, and then equating that back to and modelling it back to a situation for the child is really good. Oh, do you remember when that happened? Oh, in this book, oh yeah, I can see that happened to you, didn't it? But also really important is that they know they can come to you and reach out and say, and even if they have maybe done something they know they shouldn't, it's kind of being able to, right, I'm going to listen. And that has to help for when they're teenagers and when they're older. What I don't want as a parent myself is for my children to hide their behaviours from me. I would rather that we have an open conversation about things. And yes, I might not agree with some of their choices, but I'd rather know that they can come to me and that I will try to listen and not judge. And I think with our little ones, it's the same, just trying to, okay, so that happened and you did something that wasn't very kind, wasn't it? But okay, let's think about what we can do next time. So yes, vocabulary, modelling, adults modelling as well. So it can be, oh, that really frustrated me when that happened, or I felt really angry when that person cut in front of me in the car. So just give, again, like you say, using that vocabulary as much as possible so that they have the tools, trying to encourage them to come to you, maybe having strategies that will help. One of the strategies that we teach is kind of just breathing. So I probably made the mistake as a teacher quite early on that if a child was struggling, I'd be like, breathe, take some breaths with me. And actually, one of the things I've learned along the way is if a child is very dysregulated, hearing the words, I think as an adult as well, if someone when I was cross told me to breathe, I can imagine what I might want to say. So it's a case of kind of you exaggerating your breath, so that hopefully they might then join in with you. So you doing that calming breath, and then eventually they'll join with you. And one of the things we advocate for in our training is co-regulation. So we all know that self-regulation is obviously being able to support yourself and knowing how to calm yourself down. But our little ones need to be taught that first. And so co-regulation is what we've been talking about, is going on the journey with them and modelling the breathing. So the breathing things you can do is kind of up and down the fingers, taking in breaths. It can be counting. So that's just really simple. Lots of children like that. And I taught that the other day to a 2-year-old, and he was very excited to be able to show all his friends within his setting that he could do his special breathing.
I think I've seen that somewhere. I think if you Google starfish finger breathing or something like that, you'll get like a little model of it, so you can have a look and see what it actually looks like, because we're audio.
Yes, yeah, I'm going to say, you can't really see it, can you? Yeah, but there's so many things online, so many mindfulness, so many breathing things. As a parent myself, I used to use, I think it was called Mooley, which was a clip-on yoga, but they were superheroes. They were like people dressed up as superheroes. So, and just things like that, kind of teaching that little bit of mindfulness for your children. So, okay, this has happened. When we're calm, let's do something to calm ourselves down. And the other thing that I really advocate within my training is a comfort box, which is kind of like a calm down box, but having resources that children, so within settings, I ask them to have things that they know the children will need, the children like. So some children like spinny things, some might like the bubble ones. Bubbles are great for calming breath, especially with younger children as well, and older children. But having that bubble, so when they're blowing, they're calming. Again, they're calming their central nervous system. But having a little box maybe in your kind of comfy area, and the comfy area can be in the living room, it can be in their bedroom, but a little space where if they are feeling overwhelmed, they might take themselves off to and do some sort of calming. So they're the kind of things that we advocate as strategies and tools to be able to help a child with understanding how to calm. And I think it's being really explicit as well to your children, and saying, like, as a parent, I'm here, I'm going to help you. Let me show you some things that might help. And then you'll find that the children will like a particular thing, they'll ask for it next time. And then maybe it's in your bag or something, so that you're prepared again when you're out and about. And so before, the other thing is as well, being prepared, as we said last time about being prepared with going to school. I think being prepared with transitions, we expect that children know how to move from one thing to another. So for example, if they're really engrossed in play, and we say, right, we're going now. But I was just in. So very often in settings, we advocate for giving children warnings, particularly if they find that transition quite hard. So it might be just going over to them and saying, okay, we've got 5 minutes before we're about to leave the house. So can you just finish what you're doing now? And then it might be going back again and just sort of saying, oh, we've got 2 minutes now just before we leave the house, and you need to put your shoes on, okay? And I think it's also being clear about, you said about language, your language that you're using with the children. You're not asking them, do they want to put their shoes on? It's very much telling them, but in a nice, it's time to put your shoes on, as opposed to, do you want to put your shoes on now? So being really clear with your language.
I suppose because we, as adults, I remember working in retail, and we were always kind of encouraged to ask someone to do something, but as a question rather than a command, or not that you command your kids, but not rather than saying, can you do that? You sort of say it in a different way. But I suppose with children, that makes it unclear. Yeah. You're giving me an option.
Yeah. Are you giving me a choice?
Yeah. So, yeah, as parents, our language must be concise and clear.
And I think it's really important with your language is being really clear and saying, I need you to put your shoes on now, or I need you to finish that, and then it's time to put your shoes on, or pick up your bag, or put the brick in that box. It's really, and one of the things we talk about within settings is being really explicit. If you want our children to tidy up, for example, tidy up is quite ambiguous to a child. Who knows what tidy up means? But it is really kind of talking to your children and using it as a teaching tool. Right, we put that brick in that box, we put that teddy goes on there. And I've always been a big advocate for tidying up, that children shouldn't be expected to do the whole thing, because it's too much. And certainly within settings, I advocate for children to have little areas, like, so he does the bricks or he does the chairs or something. But at home, it can be that they do a few things, like, can you pick up 5 things? And mummy's going to pick up 5, or daddy's going to put this away here. But it should be a joint process, so they understand what kind of tidying up. It's about, again, about modelling, I suppose, isn't it, really? Modelling as a parent what the expectation is. And I think one of the things that some people think with relational practice is that there's no boundaries, and that's very much not the case. There still is the expectation, and you make it clear to the child, this is what's expected, or we're going to finish our job, and then I'm afraid that will be the end. We need to go get ready for bedtime or something. And it's not about backing down on that or negotiating. And even if the child does feel overwhelmed and flip their lid, it's about, I can see this is really tricky for you. I can see this is really hard, and we still need to go to bed. So you're not giving up in on that. It is, I can see it's really hard, and you really wanted to play with that. So it's the empathising side. You really wanted to play with that car, and we can get that out tomorrow, can't we? But so you're still not backing down on the fact that you need to do it, but it's just doing it in a different way, as opposed to telling your children what's going to happen. And then if they don't do it, given the punishment. That's the difference, I think, is understanding that there's still boundaries in place, but it's done in an empathetic way.
Okay, so putting your child's feelings at the forefront of how you address the situation.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just always being aware and being clear with your words. So again, don't say a don't. So instead of saying, don't touch that, it would be, we don't touch that. Or I can't think of another example. But it is about telling the child what you do want them to do. So if you holding hands or stop at the road, it's kind of not ever giving that ambiguity to the language. It is very much, this is what I need you to do. And being clear and kind with it, and compassionate with it. Shoes on, coat on, thank you. Kind of, so it's not for them to decide whether they can or can't.
No, it's making me question how I ask my children to do things. I'm thinking, maybe I can change my language at home and see if that makes a difference, because it seems like a very small thing that might completely change our getting out of the house for the better, you know, instead of, could you please, and that repetition as a parent where you just do it.
I'm under no illusions that, and having experienced myself, I'm under no illusions that this works all the time. It doesn't. But I think it's really important that we try and remain calm, because leaving the house, as we know, is stressful for anybody. It never seems to run calmly. And if it does, wow, that's a joy. But it is, yeah. And as I said before, it's the preparation, isn't it?
Yeah.
But giving the warnings, I think it's really important to give children, just because we assume we know what we're going to do in our day. We know where we're going. We know what's going to happen next. And it is just about giving your child that courtesy of knowing a little bit about what's going to happen. We're going to go to this shop and this shop and this shop, just so that they have some sort of concept and understanding of what's to come next.
And going back to what you mentioned earlier about time in, time out, and the difference, could we just talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's so interesting. I know it goes back to co-regulation, but I think it's quite nice to re-mention it again.
So time in is where a child may have flipped their lid or maybe feeling worried or nervous about something, and it's about spending time with them. I think the concept of time out was always you remove a child from the situation and give them time to reflect, but away from everyone else. And as I said to you earlier, when the children are having their biggest emotions, we're saying that we're not there. We're abandoning them, and it's that you need to go off, you need to deal with this by yourself and come back to us when you're ready. And the difference with time in is you may not be right next to the child because they may not want you that close. I think it's really important to respect children's need for space. As adults, if there's something that's making me feel uncomfortable or someone, you will move yourself away. And I think it's important to respect children's space there. But it is along the lines of, I'm here when you're ready. I'm here to help you. I'm here to talk about it. And I may have some things that can help you, but then just remaining quiet, being quiet. And then after, when the child is ready, if they want the embrace, having the embrace, and then talking about, right, let's talk about what happened. I think a long while ago, I had a setting in one of my training things that said that the children in their care were struggling when they went out with staying towards the buggy, and they were wanting to run off. And obviously it was becoming a conflict. And so should I set the expectations before I go out? I tell them what I'm expecting of them. And then we go out and they still try and run around. So then I end up coming back in. And she said to me afterwards, like, should I talk to them about it when they're calm, or is it pointless because the moment has already happened? And I said, no, absolutely. When they're home and they're calm and they're kind of engaged, it might just be bringing it up and just sort of saying, you know, when you were running away from there, that wasn't safe. And it really made me feel worried that I couldn't keep you safe at that point. So I need you to stay with me. Otherwise, you will have to hold my hand or so setting that boundary, but certainly talking about it afterwards. So I think it is being clear on expectations, giving them the space if they want it, talking to them afterwards and saying, right, this happened, let's see what we can do next time. How can I help you? And I think in that moment, it's more about that connection. It's more about the child realising that when they have all those feelings inside and they don't know what to do with them, that somebody will... I always talk in my training about a safe person. Very often the safe person is the person that gets the most of the outburst, the overwhelming feelings. And you can usually tell within a setting and with parents at home who is the child's safe person, because it is the person that will get the most of the big feelings. And that's because the child trusts that person enough to keep showing up for them. And I think that's the part. And I think if you are that safe person and you do get the brunt of most of those big feelings, it can feel really horrible. But I always tell citizens that means that they obviously trust you enough to show their kind of their true self, their big feelings. And like I say, it can be at school. I always talk about the fizzy Coke explosion, and it's been around for a long time. And I really liked it because I thought it was a really good way. Again, I'm always about finding visuals to help me kind of represent things. And the fizzy Coke explosion is, as it says, like a bottle. And throughout the day, I don't know, maybe a little one's going to preschool and they've rushed out the door because everyone's late. That's the first little shake in that fizzy Coke bottle. Maybe they get to the setting and their key worker, who's normally there to look after them, isn't there because she's off sick, or he is off sick, and they shake the bottle. Or maybe their best friend's on holiday, and if they're at school, maybe the lunch that they thought they were going to have isn't the lunch. So throughout the day, they're playing with their friends and they have a disagreement. They're just shaking up that bottle all the day, and then eventually it explodes. So it can be an explosion at school or a setting like a nursery or a preschool, or it could be that it's saved up for at home with a parent. And I think that's important to know, is when a behaviour happens, it hasn't just come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
there's always something that has led up to it. It can be as simple as someone's invaded their space, but there's always something. And it could be that one moment where someone's taken something and they've reacted because they're little children and that's what they do. But it could also have been a build up, and this is kind of the last thing that kind of makes the explosion happen. And so then it is, yeah.
You feel quite sad, don't you, when you hear it, because you think, oh, our poor little ones are like holding all this stuff together, and then it has to come out. Even as grown-ups, it has to come out somehow. And so for them, it, like you said, it would be the 4 o'clock overwhelmed, throwing the bag on the, you know, this is it, I'm done.
Yeah. And I think it is just being aware. As an adult, you would take yourself off and maybe you'll watch your favourite TV programme, or maybe you'll go and have a bath or something. So we've developed strategies as adults to be able to hopefully kind of reset our central nervous systems. And I think very often it is food, again, is a regulator for adults, as we very often do lots of eating to help regulate. But it is teaching your children to be able to think about what happened and kind of unpick it. It's really important. I think it's really important as well as parents. We know our children really well. And I think within settings, our key workers and teachers that work with our children, they know those children really well because they spend so much time with them. So you will know that child. You will know things that trigger your child or a child in a setting. But it's also being aware of your own triggers as an adult. I think it's really important to be aware of your own triggers. And for me, it's rudeness. I find it really hard if a child is rude to me, but I have to remember to kind of keep that in track and not do the how dare you be rude, because actually that's not teaching them. And instead it might be like, oh, I wonder why you think it's okay to talk to me like that, or oh, I can see you're feeling really cross, or I can see you're quite angry by the words you're using to me at the moment. But as an adult, it's really important to know what things are going to trigger you to respond in that way.
As we're talking, I realise how children help us reflect and back on ourselves, and maybe have that interest, you know, that look at us, how we were raised, but also what triggers us and forces us to address our emotions and how we deal with them.
Parenting is not an easy job.
Parenting, teaching, anything that involves young children, because they're these amazing mirrors and they throw everything back at you and they force you to address yourself.
They're very usually very in tune with understanding. I mean, little ones can understand straight away if someone likes them. They pick up on it straight away. They'll know. I think that's the other thing as well, is when working with settings, is trying to get them to realise that sometimes the way an adult presents themselves, that's what the child is picking up on. So it's just about kind of being like, as we said, that warm, empathetic and caring, knowing for a child, it's about knowing that they're valued, knowing that they're important, knowing that they've been seen. And I think for children, when we're at home and there's lots of children around, it's having those little moments so that they feel like they're important. And in setting, it's so important for children to feel like they're noticed by adults and truly valued by adults.
Looking at emotions, what would you say when you use the term emotionally available adult? What do you mean?
So an emotionally available adult is an adult that is able to come to a situation that they are in a good place, they are regulated themselves, and that they can come and help with the behaviour. If you're not an emotionally available adult, it means that you might not listen properly, you might go in and react very often. And I think one of the questions that we say when we're doing our training is to, as we said earlier, before you go into a situation, just stop and think, how am I feeling at this point? Am I going to come in here and because I'm frustrated that this is the third time I've had to come and deal with something, am I going to come in and shout? Or am I going to come in and be able to say, okay, can I contain this? What's going on? How can I help? So it is spotting your triggers, making sure that you are thinking about, again, as we said, curious, using those curiouses. So the phrase that I really like, Dan uses different phrases. There's a book that he has I really have found helpful. It's called The Whole-Brained Child, and that is 12 proven strategies to nurture your child's developing mind. And I found that really helpful both for parents and for practitioners. He uses phrases like engage, don't enrage, connect and redirect. But the one that I really like comes from the therapeutic world, and that is, therapeutic world is just a style of supporting children's behaviour that with children that have had adverse childhood trauma. But the phrase they use is connect before correct. Sorry, let's get that right. Connect before correct. And I really like that, because I think, so some of my training that I've done, very often people can go in and they can react to situations. And if you think about connecting before you correct, it can be going over. Children are ready if you're marching over there and that march is, they know that there's something about to happen. But whereas if you were to walk over and maybe there's some squabbling going on and just look at some of the children and say, oh, have you got new shoes on? Oh, your jumper. Oh, I've just seen a heart on your jumper. The connection lowers their central nervous system and calms them. So it's also a connect. So I always think and try when I'm dealing with behaviour within setting is looking at making that connection first. So I've used this in a school that I worked in with much older children, and lining up for lunches and things was always quite a bone of contention. And I used to, rather than going and say, you need to move to the back, I used to go in and measure my feet against the children and measure my height and be like, oh, I can't believe how big your feet are. Your feet are like the same size as mine. But try and make that connection first, because then they're not ready to be in that fight mode with me. They may then have been able to have a conversation, and I'd say, you do realise that you're not actually meant to be it. You're supposed to be up there because the younger ones need to go first. But it's about that connecting before correcting. So that, I think as an adult, when you come to a situation, I always keep that in the back of my mind. If I can connect with the child. So some children, and again, it depends in settings, this can be different because some children might not like touch, but you know your child as a parent, but it can be ruffling their hair, it can be like touching their shoulder, just making that connection before you then address the behaviour, because sometimes make all the difference before coming in and reacting. So I think that's the connect before correct, I think is a really powerful phrase to remember. That I wonder comes both from the therapeutic world and from Dan Siegel, is I wonder. So you're not telling the child how they feel, you're not telling them what's happened, but you're wondering aloud. It's that curiosity. So it's, I wonder if actually the reason you're feeling really cross at the moment is because your sister took your drink, the cup that you wanted. So it's wondering aloud, giving them the tools to be able to talk about the situation that's happened. And then, as we said before, it's about thinking about your pitch, your tone and your position, just being aware if you raise your voice, the child will very often raise theirs. So come into the situation that you're calm, that you're an emotionally available adult, ready to listen, ready to take on some of that. Because that's what we do end up doing. We do as practitioners or as parents, we end up, because we have to, we end up taking on our children's emotions. So whatever's just happened, it can't help but affect us along the way. And so I think it's really important, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, is a little bit about taking care of yourself. And that's something we advocate within our training. But I always like to, again, another picture analogy is that remembering with behaviour that, I think again this came from one of my therapeutic books, but looking at a lake with pebbles, and that you can keep throwing in your pebbles, eventually they will start to show up above the water. So every time you're doing a little bit of teaching and explaining to a child, it's making that little connection in the brain, so that next time hopefully they might be able to rely on it or remember what happened and how a parent supported them or how a practitioner supported them. So it's kind of, we're just trying to constantly make those little connections. And it might be that we don't, as practitioners, get to see how we've helped along the way, but we know that we've added some of those little pebbles so that later on in their life and their journey, those little moments will come above the water and they'll be like, that's how I can handle that situation, or that's what I can do in this situation. But yeah, an emotionally available adult is an adult that goes to the situation ready to be able to help support that child emotionally.
It's amazing to try and encourage parents to do that, as well as practitioners, is that sort of be prepared yourself before you address the situation.
Absolutely.
So that its impact of it is greater than, like you said, if you just react. Because if you just react,
it escalates and it just carries on, and then they'll say something, you'll say something. And I think one of the things we advocate on the training, and it's harder when you're a parent, but is if there is someone else, if you are not in that place to be able to deal with it, if there is someone else around to be able to step in, then sometimes that might be, if they're kind of calmer and able to deal with the situation. Obviously, as parents, that can't always happen, because sometimes will be out and about by yourself. And I think one of the things that we advocate on the training as well is looking after yourself, because when managing big feelings from children, it's really important that you take care of yourself and just take those few minutes, do whatever makes you happy for your self-care. But I think the worry is that if you don't take care of yourself, then you have something that can happen over a long period of time, especially if you're dealing with some tricky behaviours over quite a long time, something called compassion fatigue, which is where you just haven't got the space or the energy to then be compassionate. So you don't want to get to that part where you feel like it's too much. You just need those little moments and reaching out to people to help you to be able to, as we're trying to advocate for our children, that reach out when you need to. I think as an adult, it's really important to know that if you have dealt with a really big behaviour, and it may be that you have gone through all of the motions. You've done the standing near them, time in, being there, available. Then you've worked all the way until where they're calm. You've done all the kind of the co-regulation strategies of being able to sit with them, talk about their emotions, doing their breathing, having their sensory toys. And the last part of that I hadn't mentioned earlier, and it's the really important part, is the repair. And the repair is where the child will do something to, if they've done something unkind, or so say, for example, in a setting, maybe they've ticked out all the boxes of toys because they were cross or angry. The idea is they make a little repair. So it's not tidying up the whole of the area, because that's not something that could happen. Actually, that could escalate behaviours again. It's maybe they pick up 1 or 2 pieces of the toys and put it back in the box to show a repair. If they've hurt someone, maybe they get a cold tissue or they rub the area where, some children choose to say sorry, and if that's how they've been brought up, that's fine. Sorry can be tricky for some children, particularly those with early childhood trauma. So I very often advocate for showing sorry. So showing sorry is putting a few bricks away, rubbing an area if they're okay to do that. If you do it too soon, it can escalate behaviours again. But having a little paper towel, maybe drawing a picture, taking a teddy over to someone. So you're showing sorry. And I also think the word sorry is sometimes banded around, especially with older children. Oh, sorry. And it doesn't have an impact. So in my house, we talk about showing sorry, and sorry means it changes the behaviour, or that you won't try and do the behaviour again.
Talking about showing sorry, I remember watching a cartoon when my little one was very young called Daniel's Tiger. And they have this thing where they sing a little song and they say, saying I'm sorry is the first step. Yeah. Then how can I help? I always say that to him, like, saying sorry is wonderful. And I appreciate that because I know that you mean it. But how are we now going to use that sorry? And it is because the word sorry does get used and misused. And if language is so important, we need to give it back its power. Yeah. The word sorry means a lot, but it is a doing word, a bit like love. It's a doing word. Yeah. We have to demonstrate this.
And I think that's exactly it. You can say sorry, but it doesn't mean the person's going to straight away feel happy if you've hurt them. So it is showing sorry. I think showing sorry is a really good way of remembering it, is just to, like I said, they do one thing that kind of repairs. And also as an adult, whether a practitioner or a parent, I think it's really important, because when something has happened, that's why the behaviourist view is so good, because you get to punish, because it makes, in some ways, you feel better. For the behaviour that's happened, you get to take control of it and punish what happened. Whereas with if you are thinking about being a bit more relational and working on understanding the behaviour, it can sometimes feel like there's no punishment. And I think sometimes people find that hard, that actually this child's done this and nothing's happened. Whereas the repair is that little part. It's a little bit of them being able to make amends. And it is the showing sorry. It's, like I said, it can be taking a toy over to someone. It can be drawing a picture, getting a wet paper towel. They're showing their repair. And I think that's the last part on that journey in the behaviour wave, is being able to understand that little final part is so important. And the other thing that I really advocate for in the training is adults saying sorry and meaning it. So if they do make a mistake, and I think this is something that's really important, as we're saying with the self-care and understanding yourself and being able to, they say, not pour from an empty cup, don't they? You have to keep filling up your cup to make sure that you can then give to your little ones. It's really important as an adult, if we make a mistake, that we teach our children that actually we can own up to stuff. I think we expect an awful lot of children, telling them what they have to do and what the right response is for things. But I wonder how often as an adult we're quite prepared to model that and saying, I'm really sorry I shouted. Let me explain why I shouted. You were running near the road and it really scared me. And so, yes, I did shout because I wanted to keep you safe. Or I'm really sorry I blamed you for doing something. I was mistaken. It was your brother or it was your friend at your setting. So I think as an adult, a really powerful tool is to be able to model sorry yourself. And it will teach your children that, one, it's okay to make mistakes, and that when you do make a mistake, you own up to it and you do something about it. So I think as a parent and as a practitioner, showing sorry is really important.
That's so true. We have to, because children
you have to practice what you preach.
Definitely. And as parents and practitioners and everybody, we forget that children watch us. We may not be taking all of them in as much as we should be. We always talk about, actually take a moment, watch what's happening. But they watch us all the time.
They do watch.
And so by modelling the behaviour, I'm sure that has such a bigger impact.
Yeah, and I think showing kindness to other people, how you talk to each other, like as adults, is really important. Children are watching that. How you talk to other children are watching that. And I think it is just being aware that, and like I say, if you do make a mistake and you do, it is saying, do you know what, I shouldn't have done that. That was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. In that moment, I felt quite cross or I felt quite frustrated, but I need to learn from that. So just being an advocate for your child. One thing I will say is, obviously, we're talking about all the things you can do. It's really important to know, and we advocate this a lot in the training, that you are only human as well.
Definitely.
And as much as I've kind of learned along my journey with all the people that I've been lucky enough to work with, and I do try and practice what I preach at home, but I am only human, as is anyone else. So you will make mistakes, and there will be times where you're tired and you're frustrated and you have a deadline or something and you need to get your children to sleep. It's about being human and teaching your children again that we're not all perfect human beings, and that actually we all have moments where we feel worried, anxious, stressed. And like I say, I'm a big advocate for talking to your children about it. So I was really, really anxious about doing that. I was really nervous about doing that presentation, but actually it went really well. So just kind of using that as everyday language so children know that the adults have those feelings too. So I think it is also about cutting yourself some slack. You're doing the very best that you can. Some of these things help because they make a better connection for you and your child knows the boundaries, knows the expectations, but also knows that you'll be there to support them when they need those. But it is also about being human and knowing that you will make mistakes and just holding your hands up sometimes like, all right, I didn't do that too well. That didn't go too good.
But that's okay. I think that we're all on this journey. We're all learning how to be parents.
Of course it is.
And things are constantly changing, and we're becoming more aware, just so much more aware of children, their emotions, our emotions, that it's okay. It's okay. I just feel like it's okay to, like you said, to have those days where things don't go as well as you hoped.
No.
And hopefully you rise again the next morning and you get the opportunity to start all over again and put some of the tips and things that you've mentioned in place. And even if it's just like one small change, it could have
if you can connect before you correct, that's the one thing. But I would also say as well, that also goes along with other parents as well, that when you're out and about, I try really hard, if there is a parent trying to support their child within a supermarket or somewhere, try not to either stare or pass judgment, because I think it's really important that we have no idea when you're seeing a behaviour. And also when I go into settings as well, it's really important that I'm not judgmental when a child is behaving a particular way, because you never know what led up to that. You never know how many physical shake-ups they've had throughout the day.
Absolutely.
You never know how much the parent has already had that day to be able to deal with, or within settings, how many times they've had to kind of give that contained adult, that available adultness to that child. So I think it is really about being supportive to each other as well. And that's, again, one of the things we advocate in our training heavily, is about look after each other. When you're helping children with big emotions, you as a team need to look after each other and just kind of support. I used to do Crunchy Friday with my team when I was an early years leader. I used to take in crunches on Friday so we could all have just any chocolate, just so we could have a little treat on a Friday, just as a thank you. Like, I know you've kind of worked really hard this week. I know this is like a little token of sort of gratitude. But I think, supporting each other and just not being judgmental with other parents. They are doing the best at that time that they have the capabilities for. And like you say, hopefully they are having a bad day. The next day may be different. And maybe if they have a little bit of sleep, or, they can. And that's the thing, isn't it? With all of this, is adults are learning how to be. No one teaches us really how to be good parents. With practitioners, hopefully we have our training along the way that kind of supports us to know how to support children in the best possible way. But we're all learning as parents and finding our feet. And that's what I would say, is I know all this stuff and I do try and use it, but there are days where I don't. And there are times where I do react rather than respond because I'm tired or have something that I need to do. And so it is just about being human and not judging each other, trying to be supportive if possible to other parents if they are having a child, even just giving a smile as if like, yeah, you've got this. Just
so sort of supporting each other. Like you said, it'd be nice if parents did that, right? A little bit more. So it's okay. We know that all children have days where everything is too much.
Yeah.
And you're, like you mentioned earlier, you're doing the best you can in the moment in which that is being presented to you. And it doesn't help if everybody else is looking at you like, why are you here? You knew this wasn't going to work.
And yeah, I think it is really important just to kind of not be judgmental. And just because a parent does something differently to you doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It might work for their child. I know how I've chosen to parent my children, but that may work differently for someone else. And the same within settings. We keep going back to it constantly, saying, you know your children, you know what they need, you know what their interests are, so you know what will work for them. And also, I think the other thing is, as a parent, you can have two vastly different children. What works with one child very much doesn't work with the other child.
Absolutely.
And it's very much about, again, knowing your children. I think that's the thing we advocate most in the training, is about knowing your children, understanding your children, and kind of reflecting on yourself on how you come up to the situation when something arises.
Oh, thank you so much, Natalie. It's been a really wonderful experience, and I feel like I've learnt a little bit more, and I feel like there's so much information out there. And like you said, when you're in a settings, you get trained, you get taught all this, but as a parent, only a little bit filters down. So it's really lovely to have the opportunity to sit down and actually go through some of it with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on today's episode, and we truly appreciate you listening. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, subscribe, and follow to stay updated on future episodes. We look forward to seeing you next week.